Nope, never mind. Cancel that. Hello, everybody. Just 1 second.
Yummy like a gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for June 5th, 2023. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, Square Enix is worried about the pre-orders for Final Fantasy XVI. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Lex Luddy, everybody. Lexi, how are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. It's a long weekend over here in Ireland, and I'm really feeling it because it's the first weekend that has gone since like the off season started for the sport I follow, and suddenly I was like, what the fuck am I meant to do with my time? Usually I just have like rugby on in the background, and now there's fucking nothing to watch, even though there's a million things I could be watching.
Yeah, I'm in that same zone where hockey is, we're in the finals right now. It's kind of coming in, but it's not on every day like it was for a while there during the playoffs. And I was just watching it every day. I'm like, well, this makes sense. This is why I have YouTube TV. And now it's like, oh, why do I have that expensive cable subscription thing? That's stupid.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, a month ago I was watching it nonstop. But yeah, it's weekends for me these days have mostly been mowing the lawn every week. I was traveling a little bit ago when I went to New York for our meeting, whenever the hell that was. And I got back and it was like, I was back for like a day and a half before I had a chance to mow my lawn again. We're in Ohio. I'm like right on Lake Erie. So grass grows really fast here. So my lawn was out of control and my neighbor mowed my lawn. And I'm like, I know it's a friendly thing from this neighbor, but still it made me feel like, it's that passive aggressive, like, okay, I can't let my lawn get too long or he's going to make me feel guilty about it. So every weekend I've been mowing the lawn and it's been a lot. I'm not a fan of that. And I would pay someone to do it if one, if I could afford it, but two, if there was anyone available to do it. They're all so booked. You can't even pay someone to mow your lawn. So I'm just like out there every week.
Yeah. I'm living at my parents' for the summer, and like we live on a hill and it's a big garden compared to the rest of the house. So like, it is a nightmare to cut that grass, and I'm really hoping that my dad isn't watching because he might ask me to start cutting the fucking grass.
Don't let him get that idea. Don't let him get that idea.
Yeah. Can't be free labor.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. All right. We're going to get into this mess, but before we do, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you're watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Square Enix is, quote, slightly panicking about Final Fantasy XVI pre-orders. This comes from Imran Khan's Everything Everywhere Once a Week newsletter through his Patreon, which is called Pros and Cons, which continues to be the greatest name for any Patreon ever. In what may be one of the oddest Q&A style updates on a game I've ever seen from a major publisher in some time, Square Enix tweeted today with a reminder that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth development is still progressing and they're working on committing to a release date, likely still within the initial window of winter. I bring this up because I had heard recently that Square Enix is panicking slightly over Final Fantasy XVI pre-order numbers, which are tracking behind Final Fantasy XV, even accounting for the fewer number of launching platforms. Granted, those are pre-order numbers, and they're usually only useful to gauge guaranteed day one sales versus potential day one sales, so the actual number could blow everyone away. But with the current tracking, I wonder if they want to remind people that the next chapter of Final Fantasy VII's remake trilogy exists and give it more marketing time than they had planned. The initial sales of Remake were quite good, but it slowed down faster than Square Enix seemed to expect. So I imagine they really want Rebirth to sell as well as possible. Well, of course they do, but I imagine they're really, really hoping for an uptick in sales. How are you reading this situation? Do you think Square Enix is already shifting to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because of a concern about the strength of Final Fantasy XVI?
I think there's a few things to it. If you purely look at it from like the years that they're releasing, Final Fantasy 15 had a much lighter year. 2015, wasn't a super heavy year for games.
Yeah, and that game did very well.
Yeah, there hadn't been a mainline console single player Final Fantasy since the PS3 at that point. You have a lot of external factors of like a lot of people who were into that game or weren't into Final Fantasy 15 are now looking at 16 and are much more hesitant. And also, I think like I haven't seen a whole lot of marketing around that game, which has been super strange. Like it's out in 2 weeks, and it's not like I'm getting Twitch ads for it, not like I'm getting YouTube ads for it.
That's good.
It kind of seems like they just expect it to sell almost because Final Fantasy 14 is doing so well. And I think that there's a certain element of they haven't realized that those are two separate markets. The people who play Final Fantasy 14 and the people who will play a giant single player PS5 exclusive game. It's weird. It's a game that I think actually looks really good. I'm way into the combat. I thought the combat in 7 Remake kind of fluctuated between really good and really bad depending on how much health the enemies had. Like as soon as those combat encounters got longer, it just became a bit of a chore. But I think 15 looks like it could be a really interesting direction for the franchise. But like, yeah, I can't say that I'm super surprised that it's not pre-ordering well. It might sell great, but it does make sense that's not pre-ordering well.
Yeah, I think I think for Square Enix, they are like 15 did very well for them. It sold really well, like long term. And then they've sort of been using that as a yardstick ever since. And 7 didn't quite do that well, but 7 was exclusive to PlayStation. Well, it's not on Xbox is how we should phrase it. And it's like, but still, they were expecting that game to do a little bit better in terms of having stronger legs and selling better long term. That was the one that really brought that meme for us into play, where we were looking at the numbers of that. And it's like, oh, it sold 5 million copies. That's like half of what Luigi's Mansion had sold at the time. And it's like, well, I mean, Luigi's Mansion 3 is a console exclusive. It's, that I had not put it in the tier of games that Final Fantasy was in. Clearly that's wrong. Like Luigi's Mansion is in that tier, and it looks like it's in a tier beyond that.
But also, when was like the last time Square Enix had reasonable expectations for any of their projects?
Another layer on top of this, right? Square Enix is the company that always seems to have really high expectations. They get high on their own supply every time, right? And now it's like, okay, are you doing that to Final Fantasy 16? Now, Final Fantasy 16, I think, is going to do very well. I think that I think the reason that pre-orders are pretty slow is, one, pre-ordering culture has definitely waned even since Final Fantasy 15. And then 2, the thing you said, this year is just bananas. People are going from Zelda to Street Fighter to Diablo 4 right in this window when they would be pre-ordering a game. And they're like, you just said it's 2 weeks out, and half of chat was like, oh my God, it's 2 weeks out. People can't even comprehend that game right now because they're so busy with so many other games they want to be playing. And
also they didn't get Greg Miller to announce the release date, which was
exactly just a complete boneheaded move. They didn't get Tim and Greg up on a stage and to really deliver
and then
the news.
Embarrass them by delaying it again.
But I think like a few things are going to happen. We are going to almost certainly get a demo, likely that Sunday night when they do the Final Fantasy 16 blowout after Xbox's showcase.
Love the demos. They love them,
right? And that demo is likely going to have progression carry over. So I think a lot of people are going to pick it up, fall in love with that demo, and then from there, pre-orders will take off. And even if pre-orders don't, I think the game is still going to sell really well. I think Final Fantasy 15 numbers are realistic, especially if this becomes like the de facto Sony exclusive in that God of War Horizon mold, and a lot of people show up for it. I don't think it'll do Luigi's Mansion 3 numbers of 13 million at this point, but it could do 10 million. It could easily get to 10 million. So yeah, they might be panicking now. If they are panicking though, why is the answer to remind people about Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth?
Game.
Yeah, different game. I mean, you were like, okay, we haven't seen marketing, and it's like, this is not unique to this game. Square Enix's like last 6 or 7 games, those like there was Bang 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 game after game last year, I
Octopath
almost
Traveler got so little attention.
none of them
and
did.
That is a great JRPG.
Various Day Life. What was not Vagrant Story? There was a whole bunch of like tactics RPGs and RPGs that they put out. These, somewhat smaller games, but none of them got real marketing love. Octopath Traveler, I think, being the primary sort of victim of that, of Octopath Traveler 2 being pretty good, people really liking it, and yet it kind of fizzling because Square Enix just did not put a lot of marketing power behind it, and it felt that way. So it just didn't feel important. On the Jeff Bakalar importance scale, it was just not.
I tell you what, I'll ask my hairdresser, because that is like something that I didn't realize, is that there's a quadrant of people who only really care about Final Fantasy games and the single player Final Fantasy games. And it turns out that is just my hairdresser. Whenever I tell them that like I work in games, the only questions they have for me is like, have you heard anything about the Final Fantasy VII remake? And I'm like, it's still coming.
Yeah, man, people in chat, they're helping me. Star Ocean, Valkyrie Profile, Harvestella. Yeah, Dio Field Chronicles.
Alive.
Yeah, Live Alive is the one that probably had the best chance because it was in the Nintendo Direct, and that and it was pretty interesting looking, and it felt important for all those reasons.
And Live Alive came to PC like 2 weeks ago, and there was maybe a tweet about it that was like ish.
I didn't even know that. I did not even realize that. Okay, wow, yeah, I just, it seems like Square Enix has done this thing where like we are pulling back on our spending, and that primarily means we are pulling back on our marketing. And it's like, I don't know if that is the play here, especially for your games. Can you sell a
JRPG? Yeah, can you sell a JRPG without a heavy marketing push?
I don't. I feel like
it look cool.
Go back like historically. I think heavy marketing pushes are what make RPGs go around. Going back to Final Fantasy VII, taking over the world back then, it was that television commercial, that CGI television commercial. People were excited about it beforehand. I just remember being over at my friend's house, and that was on TV, and it came on, and it's like, oh my, this feels like a can't miss experience. And they have not done that same thing with Final Fantasy 16. They still have a little bit of time. 2 weeks doesn't feel like a ton of time. They could just overwhelm us in this next week coming out of Summer Game Fest with like telling us how important they think this game is. It probably will start that Sunday night with that big event.
Do they have their own dedicated event this year?
Not like a showcase from Square Enix, but that Final Fantasy 16 launch party they do have. Yes, yeah. We got I think Emma and Bailey from Fandom are going to be heading over there, and they're going to be hanging out, helping out Giant Bomb during that Summer Game Fest week. So we'll have them on the couch talking about it that night, hopefully, so we can see what they felt about the party itself, and then hopefully we'll have a report from like what's happening with that game that night. I think some people might be playing that game. I'm not, so I could say that. I haven't talked to Square Enix about it at all. So yeah, I think people might be playing that game already. We'll see. All right. Next up, Xbox says none of its first-party showcase trailers will be full CG. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. After tweeting on Sunday that there was 7 days to go until the showcase, Xbox Vice President of Games Marketing, Aaron Greenberg, was asked by a follower if the showcase would feature gameplay for announced titles and CG trailers for unannounced titles. Aaron Greenberg said it's better than that. Quote, none of our first-party games in the show are full CG trailers, Greenberg replied. Everything is either in-game footage, in-engine footage, or in-game footage with some cinematics. Each of our trailers will be labeled so it is hopefully clear for our fans. And I think there are some territories where legally they have to do that. It's not clear if Greenberg's comment was in reference to the recent PlayStation showcase, which opened with an entirely CG trailer for PlayStation's upcoming a PlayStation Studio upcoming title, Fair Games. Greenberg also told another follower that there will be no movie trailers in our game show, a possible reference to the Gran Turismo trailer, which was shown during the PlayStation showcase.
There'll be a Season 2 Halo trailer in it.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? We're just letting that thing rot in the vine. Which
they're not going to show more Master Chief's butt.
Oh, please, come on. That's the new feature. The improved butt from Season 2.
18. Yeah, the show's going to be rated 18s. And they'll have to do the warning beforehand. And it'll just be because it has that guy's butt in it.
This year, we're going even further. Master Chief is going to show his whole butthole. Can't wait.
The camera starts to pan around to the front.
Check out my Halo. Okay. This is, I think, the right thing to say. Do you believe them, Lexi?
I think that it has been the story for the longest time that you can basically say anything is in-engine at this point.
Yeah.
Like, what does in-engine even mean? When you look at trailers that have had in-engine attached to them over the years, and then you look at the actual finished games, it's like, yeah, sure, it was made with a engine that was running something on a PC somewhere, but like, is that what an actual game will look like? I think I get the vibe that they're trying to go for, which is them sort of saying like, hey, no, we're going to like show gameplay of things, and we're going to show things that are more representative of what it might feel like to play the games. But I don't necessarily think that like, every single game will, won't have CG stuff in it. I think there's enough of these games are far enough out when you think about the sort of games that they'd be showing, that there's no way they're getting in gameplay footage for their vertical slices, that they're already ready to show.
Yeah, I think that that this sounds nice, but I think you're mostly right that this is the kind of thing where we're going to go in there and be like, yeah, they said it was all in-engine or gameplay or whatever, but a lot of it's like, it still didn't give me a good idea of what I'm going to be doing when I'm playing. I think, a good example of that is that Hellblade 2 gameplay demo, which was in-engine, and I probably was kind of what gameplay will look like, but it still felt like an in-engine demo reel of what it could feel like, instead of like, oh, someone's actually on the controller playing it. And I think that is it's a difference that we can feel in a lot of these. That said, I think that this is better than having what they've done in the past, which is most of their trailers being CG. They did that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, their last big show. And that definitely felt like, or not their last, but the show where they had a bunch of new announcements instead of the one where it's like in the next 12 months, here's all these games we announced previously coming out. And all those new games, for the most part, were CG trailers. And it's like, okay, these are fun announcements up to a point, but I can only get so excited about something I can't see. And I think that this is better than that.
Yeah, and I think that stuff sort of has bitten them in the ass in the long run, not just because people are like, oh, we didn't see gameplay, but because, like you said, we get a feel for these things when we see more representative footage of them. And people looking at an Avowed CG trailer, people looking at a Fable CG trailer, people looking at a Contraband CG trailer are like, what genres of games are Xbox planning on releasing? Like, we don't really get a feel for what these games actually are beyond, cinematic trailers, which is all they are. So like, you don't know what the Fable game will actually feel like as a release. You won't know what genre it's falling into. We have no idea what Contraband is. We have no idea what all these other games actually really are. And it's led to a lot of people just feeling very hesitant about the Xbox slate.
Right. And I think that's, they need to begin unwinding that problem, like right now. Like, this is when it has to happen. 2023 was supposed to be a very good year for them. It's now has the potential of being a pretty okay year as long as Starfield hits. And that's, the only way to sort of turn that into a really positive momentum gainer for them going forward is have a really good showcase here, so that when people are feeling good about Starfield, they have something to look for and say, and that's next. Otherwise, it will just kind of be like, well, I guess Starfield was okay, but what else is there?
So a question I did actually have for you was, do you think the great experiment of Phil Spencer saying that he's letting teams do their own thing and sort of letting them go and be their own creative, independent bodies, do you think that has failed at this point? Or do you think Redfall is maybe the too harsh of an exception to judge all of things like Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush by? Because those seem like things that wouldn't have happened if there was very strict management overlooking them.
I don't think it's failed. I think it is. I think Microsoft's laissez-faire attitude towards a studio taking on a major project that is different than what they've done before, that definitely is a failure. And he said as much in the interview with Kind of Funny. But I think that they can let their studios continue to try new things. They just need to have the understanding that unless it's like a grounded situation where it's going to go in early access and you're going to let it have support in that direction, if you are going to put it out as a $70 product game from the beginning, it needs all of the love you can possibly give it, because making a new kind of game, no matter what kind of studio you are, if it's something you haven't done before, or if you have done it before and you're building up a new team. I think of Amy Hennig over at EA making a Star Wars ragtag. That was like, okay, we're going to do something we've done before now with Star Wars, But it's like actually building up a team to do that is very difficult. And the expectations for that game should be like, it's maybe going to be a 7 or at best a very low 8 at best. Like that's best case scenario, because it's we need to build up all this institutional knowledge. And that is something you can maybe overcome a little bit if you have enough time and money. Microsoft certainly has that, but are they willing to deploy that? They weren't with Redfall, clearly. Again, something he admitted publicly, Phil Spencer. So they can keep doing it. It's just they have to give these projects the love to get over that finish line, because they also you can either not do these games, or if you do them, you have to go all out. They cannot come out and be kind of Redfalls anymore. So yeah, I think parts of the experiment have failed, but overall, I generally agree that we could still expect and should hope that these studios are allowed to work on what they want to work on. All right, let's see here. Next up, Aspyr cancels plans to bring KOTOR 2 DLC to Switch version. For years on PC, KOTOR 2 fans have been able to download the restored content mod that completes the notoriously incomplete game. When developer Aspyr Media brought the game to Switch, it planned to eventually include the restored content. But now Aspyr has revealed it is pulling the plug on those plans. Here's a quote. Sadly, today we are announcing that the restored content DLC for the Nintendo Switch version of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the Sith Lords, will not be moving forward with release. Aspyr is offering up one of its other Star Wars Switch games as a make good. You can get that for free. One of the developers of the DLC explained that Aspyr was great to work with and offered to fully credit the mod team, but it is unclear why Aspyr canceled the DLC. This is, I guess it's been a long time since like they announced these things. We hadn't heard anything about this. I was pretty interested in it. I guess, them not really being able to figure it out is maybe a little surprising. Mostly though, I think this goes back to speak to, this was the team that was going to do the KOTOR remake. And that seems even more far-fetched than ever right now, right?
Yeah, I think that, something similar happened with the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, where they couldn't include the Point Lookout or whatever it was DLC, but that was very much so like DLC that they just didn't have the original source code for. This seems like they just couldn't get on the same page as modders that had been restoring content for years now. It might be because of the Switch hardware, it might be restrictions with that, but yeah, the idea that they would have been remaking the entire first game to a modern 2026 standard by the time it came out is kind of wild. And that's at Saber now.
Yes, it's at Saber. Yes. Yeah. So Aspyr was going to do it. That's the announced team. Very quickly after that, though, there were reports that Aspyr showed it off to the stakeholders, and everyone's like, "This sucks. We hate it. Please no." And the Aspyr lost the project, and it went to. I think the rumor is it went to Saber Interactive. I don't know if we've ever had that confirmed, but that seems to be the case. That Saber Interactive, the team that did the Witcher 3 port for the Switch, and the team that did SnowRunners, which is one of my favorite games, working on the KOTOR remake. Now, again, like how likely is it that team could figure this out? That also still seems pretty far-fetched, but...
So between this and the David Cage game, how many Star Wars games that have been announced are we never going to see again?
Yeah, that David Cage game was
1313.
Yeah, right. God, that David Cage game was what there was like back and forth rumors. I heard it wasn't going to be like at least until like 2027. I think I'd have to go back and look at what I actually reported, but something like that. And then it was also like right after that, someone's like, well, "You might see it before like later this year." I'm like, "There's no way in hell that is true."
I really hope we do see it so that we can finally see how they solved racism in the High Republic.
Exactly.
That's a question I've always been wondering about the Star Wars canon.
That's it. And in his game, it's different because you're supposed to feel sorry for the droids, and that's the first time anyone's ever done that. That's what makes his game different.
Oh God, I've been listening to A Civilized Age with Austin Walker and them, and they get into like some of the droid stuff, and you forget how problematic the like autonomy of droids are. I can only imagine what a David Cage version of that would be.
Just real heavy stuff, I bet. All right, Street Fighter 6 has 1 million players in its first 3 days. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. A post on the official Japanese Street Fighter Twitter account stated Street Fighter 6 has surpassed 1 million players. It also notes that a free gift has been added in-game to celebrate the milestone, which players are reporting is a profile title. The tweet also claims that Street Fighter series in its entirety has now passed 50 million copies sold. Although player count and game sales aren't the same, the milestone appears to bode well for the title's future success, given that Street Fighter V took 3 months to sell 1.4 million copies in total. That wasn't like players all at once. Street Fighter IV got off to an even faster start, selling over 3 million copies in 6 weeks. Last month, Capcom's president said that the company aims to sell 10 million copies of Street Fighter VI over its lifetime. Street Fighter V did about 7 million, Lexi. Mortal Kombat 11 or 10, 11 did massive numbers, so did 10, but 11 just kept selling and selling and selling. Capcom points out that we've had Resident Evil games do easily over 10 million, and now Monster Hunter hitting nearly 20 million. So if we're able to do things right with Street Fighter 6, we should be able to get to 10 million no problem. That seems to be the case, right?
Yeah, I think the big thing for them is going to be continuation of content. This is something that they haven't really done before from a live service point of view. Like, they've had their characters come out and things like that, but I don't think they've, apart from Monster Hunter, Capcom hasn't had very many live service games that have had continuous content in a way that a lot of modern games have to be successful. So I'm curious to see what they do. Maybe they add even stuff as simple as add more arcade games, things like that. But I really need people to stop talking about how great this game is, because I'm gonna buy it and I'm fucking suck at fighting games. I'm gonna play it for 10 hours and then be like, I can't do this.
Yeah, we're gonna do a scrub league over here, and I'm gonna try to get good, or at least get competent. It is right. I am still at the point where I'm just getting down the basics. I'm using classic controls. I know I should probably use modern, but I think I'm probably gonna use classic controls.
I really liked the modern controls.
Yes, because there's nothing wrong with them at all.
Yeah. I have I've played solo fighting games for as much time as I spent thinking about fighting games and researching and looking into old fighting games and love watching them. I have maybe played a bit of MK11 and a tiny bit of Tekken, and that's it. And I never got the muscle memory as a kid, and now I cannot do any of the inputs. So the modern controls are so good, because I'm I can actually pull off a move and know that I'm pulling it off, not accidentally do a fireball or something.
Yeah, it's the thing where I'm just getting the execution down right now, and it's but whatever. That's been fun to figure out as well. It is a very good game. And you know what, though? It's Capcom, this role that they're on is kind of illuminating why so many companies were so desperate to have their own engines, because ReEngine, the Reach for the Moon engine, has just become, it's I don't know, it's like a hit creation machine. It enables, or at least it's unlocking the creativity of the Capcom teams so much so, because it works with fighting games. It works with the action games. They're just using it across the board. They make Monster Hunter, they make Resident Evil in it. It's crazy that this is how good that this engine is, and it scales down to the Switch. It scales up really well. It looks beautiful, and it clearly is. It's something that their teams are adopting and able to use quickly without much issue. You don't hear about, oh man, these massive delays and these headaches in creating content, like what's happening with Frostbite for all the different kinds of games they were trying to make over at EA with Frostbite. Capcom figured it out, and it's paying dividends. And boy, I bet other companies are like, we have to use Unreal, but I wish we were in Capcom's shoes.
Yeah, I'm curious now that I feel like everything from the Capcom leak or from the Nvidia leak has now sort of been announced. What are your dream bookings for what's up next for Capcom? What things do you think they should look to work on now?
I am after talking with Mitch Tolkoto a handful of times, who is a huge Mega Man fan. I want them to believe in Mega Man again. That's where I'm at. I think that would be very cool. But they're doing all the cool stuff. Dragon's Dogma 2 that's a cool thing. So yeah, I want them to make a real big 3D AAA Mega Man. I think that's pretty far-fetched, actually, even for this Capcom. But I think they could pull it off, and I think it could do very well. That's what I would want, though, for sure. How about you?
I would love more Resident Evil, just because I've gotten over the last 5 years, I realized oh shit, survival horror is just my favorite thing, and I think Resident Evil might be my favorite consistent franchise. A 5 remake, so much of that would have to change. I would be way more down for a Code Veronica or a Zero remake, or even just something new in a spin-off direction. I think they could finally start to do. they could finally start to like actually move the story forward in more directions than just like Ethan and his kid. Also, I was looking at it, there's a sick part of me that wants them to remake 6. Just because that game is so fucking stupid. And like the idea of, you look at that game and there's so much art in it. Like there are so many areas, there's so many levels, they go to so many different countries. How you would create that at like 4K on an artist level, how you would employ enough people to create those models is like, I don't know how you'd do it. I don't think it's possible. I don't think they'll ever remake that game.
You mentioned the Nvidia leak, and what the most recent ones that got confirmed for that was like what, a Helldivers 2 was in there, and that's a check mark now. There's a handful of other stuff. Square Enix, most of the Square Enix games in there have been confirmed or even came out by now, except for Final Fantasy IX Remake and Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. I will say I heard very recently, once again, Final Fantasy IX Remake is real. Like that is real and happening. So, you know.
Do you think if they do that, they adopt the 7 combat, the sort of mixed real time?
I wonder.
That game just feels a lot less fast. Whenever you watch it, it feels less like there's less characters with guns and stuff. There's less stuff that you could sort of see them working that direction.
I think that's probably the right move. I mean, that's because the remake series can sort of be the evolution of that kind of combat, and then the main line can have its Devil May Cry stuff going forward, whatever. I think that'd be cool. I also think that there's a chance the Final Fantasy IX remake isn't quite as, I mean, almost certainly isn't as ambitious as the Final Fantasy VII remake stuff, but maybe somewhere between the Crisis Core and Final Fantasy VII remake stuff. And I think that would kind of require them to mostly keep the combat that the 9 already has in place, but I don't know. We'll see. People like 9 a lot. All right, let me get back to the stories here after I was checking the Nvidia leak. All right, next up, Street Fighter, we did that one. Tears of the Kingdom is now the 3rd best-selling boxed Zelda game ever in the UK. This comes from Tom the Machine Ivan at VGC. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has become the UK's 3rd best-selling boxed Zelda game after just 4 weeks. According to GamesIndustry.biz, physical sales of Nintendo's games have now overtaken those of Ocarina of Time on N64. Only Tears of the Kingdom's predecessor, 2017 Switch launch game Breath of the Wild, and 2006 GameCube and Wii release Twilight Princess have sold more box copies in the UK. Tears of the Kingdom held the top spot on the chart ahead of new entry Street Fighter VI, which reportedly didn't enjoy a strong physical launch. The PS5 version of Capcom's Fighter accounted for 79% of its box sales ahead of Xbox Series X and S version at 13% and the PS4 version at 8%. FIFA 23, Hogwarts Legacy, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe rounded off the top 5. The only other new entries were Company of Heroes 3 Console Edition and Evercade Team 17 Omega Collection 1, which debuted at number 32 and number 40, respectively. Zelda continues to, obviously, it was continuing to sell. I'm not too surprised by still being behind the box copies of those other ones. Those didn't have digital sales. If you include digital in here, this is clearly the fastest selling Zelda game, already eclipsing probably both of those other games. Maybe not Breath of the Wild quite yet, but it's probably getting there very soon.
Yeah, the stat that like super jumped out to me there was that like only 8% of Street Fighter copies were on PS4, which is a huge change from like even the beginning of this year, when there would have been way more people still picking up their PS4 games. So it seems like more or less everyone has moved on. But with like Breath of the Wild, or not Tears of the Kingdom, I don't think there will be a Zelda game that will sell quite like this for a while. Like, I don't know how you can live up to it, because it's the perfect mixture of it's been so long since the last one and people aren't fatigued from it yet that it's hard to imagine how people will be more excited for another one. I'm sure I'm going to eat my words in like 10 years time when they do release another mainline one, but like it really does seem like that game is at like an Elden Ring level of cultural penetration, where people just, everyone knows about it and has either bought it or is planning on buying it.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is obviously trading on the success of Breath of the Wild. It has been a long wait between Zelda games, one of the longest waits ever between mainline Zelda games. So that anticipation really built up. It hit with reviews. It just hit on every single possible like checkbox to get to a major success and a major launch, and it's capitalizing on all of that.
Do you think there's any chance they go back to a smaller thing until they work on the next thing?
In between, yes. I think that you bring in Grezzo, and let them make a top-down.
I would love a new Grezzo game.
Yeah, new Grezzo Zelda would be really choice right now, and I think that's probably the plan, because they probably are going to continue needing a lot of time for these major Zeldas. It pays off. Like, they took a lot of times on this one, and it's selling better than any other video game pretty much in the last couple of years. And so it's like, okay, clearly it's worth it to take that much time to get things right, to make sure it does feel big and ambitious. The next one's probably going to need a new map, so it's going to be probably even more time. It's probably going to be like with some 4K assets. It's going to be even more time. So what do you do in between? I think you that's where you let the classic Link to the Past arc of Zelda live, is over there with the Grezzo game or the equivalent from some other studio. Maybe get Capcom back on it. Capcom's probably too busy though.
I'll know we'll never get the figures for it or the stats for it, but like it would be so interesting to see the completion rate on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, especially compared to the previous games. Like being able to see how many people even make it to the first couple of dungeons in those games. I would be so curious to figure out like what the actual completion rate is.
And then their hours. So it's like they didn't beat it, but they spent twice as long in this game than they have in any other Zelda game. It's like, yeah, that sounds right. Let's see. You mentioned the digital split. I'm sorry, not the digital split, but the split between PS5 and PS4. In Japan, that's still like not what it's like at all. It's like 50-50 between PS5 and PS4. And really, like, that's when games even chart on the list over there for PlayStation. PlayStation 5 is selling really well in Japan. Software, not so much. It's like the top 30 games are almost always Nintendo games. At least 25 of the 30 of them are that way, or Nintendo platform games. But when you look at it, it's like, okay, what game is selling this month for PlayStation? It's like, this game is like 80,000 units on PS5 and then like 75,000 units on PS4. And man, that PS5 is selling really well, and yet so many people are picking up PS4s. Still picking up the game for PS4. It's like that. I guess that still explains why they've been releasing PS4 versions of these games for so long. Because there's territories like Japan that still behave that way.
I think for a lot of Japan, there just hasn't been that many PS5 only games that have spoken to them traditionally from their market point of view. Like, there hasn't been a whole lot of huge JRPGs exclusive to the next gen consoles. There hasn't been any like Devil May Cry. There hasn't been anything like that is only on the PS5. So like Final Fantasy 16 will be interesting in that sense of how well will it chart in Japan compared to all the other Switch games that are out right now. I think it would be really bad or really embarrassing for Square Enix if they didn't get like the #1 slot in Japan the month that 16 comes out. I think they'd be very upset with that.
Yes, totally. Goose Munch in chat mentioned that he wants a 2D top-down Zelda with the open Breath of the Wild structure. And I was like, man, what I really want in life, if we're doing fantasy booking of anything, it is that 2D prototype that Nintendo built of Breath of the Wild with the original NES style graphics. I got it right here. Let me bring it up for everybody. Remember this thing where it's like you could knock down the trees and the trees would turn into logs, just like in Breath of the Wild. I want this thing so goddamn bad, Lexi. It looks so cool.
Yeah, I just want to look at like the Nintendo's development workshop of like things that they haven't released, especially because like you look at the things that they do release and like they're releasing Everybody Want to Switch, and so you wonder what the things that they experimented and they didn't like like they released Labo and like just how weird have things gotten at Nintendo that we'll never find out about.
Absolutely, man. Look at that win. Exactly. Yeah, there's so much like that, the original version of Breath of the Wild, right, where it's like they were like, hey, we were making a new Zelda game. And then years later, it was like, hey, we're basically restarting because we came up with some ideas that we can't ignore. And it's like, that's when they came up with the stuff for Breath of the Wild. What was that Zelda game before that reboot? I need to see that. I bet it was kind of just another classic Zelda like always. I'm like, oh, man, when they came up with that idea, I'm glad they did. But I would have loved to have an early access version of Breath of the Wild so I could have seen the arc and see the revelations that they had. That would rule. Nintendo should let us in. Open up the vaults. Let me in, Nintendo, please. All right, let's get back here, get back there, and keep going with the show. Suda51's Grasshopper manufacturer is teasing something for June 15th. This comes from Chris Moyes at Destructoid. Grasshopper Manufacture, the studio founded by esoteric game designer Suda51, is teasing some announcement for June 15th, which is the date that its online countdown clock hits terminus. While the clock was first started back in March on the anniversary of No More Heroes, no less, fan Knuble, who's a member of my Discord, shout out to Knuble, spotted that had recently been updated with a new design as well as offering a new definitive date for the mysterious reveal. What was that?
That's a great name.
Oh, Knuble, yeah, absolutely. The timing would suggest that the reveal was initially set to take place during the weeks of Summer Game Fest event, but has now been delayed to the following week. So what is it? Well, the fact that the clock launched on No More Heroes anniversary could suggest a new entry in Suda51's lurid action-adventure series. That said, there have been some whispers that the studio has been working on a new title for some years now. A video shot at the studio itself last year showed an artist working on a grotesque boss character, leading some to believe a new Shadows of the Damned might be in the works. Although it's been a while since we heard anything of on the Lollipop Chainsaw remake, Suda51 and his current staff are not involved with that project, so it is unlikely to pertain to that game. Whatever the ultimate reveal turns out to be, all of the prospects are pretty exciting. Lexi, is this exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, first, shout out to Chris Moyes, lovely person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely blessed to have met them. But yeah, Grasshopper has not released a whole lot of stuff over the last few years. When you look at like Let It Die in 2016, then a remake of the Silver Case game, or a sequel to the Silver Case game in 2018. Travis Strikes Again in 2019, which was like such a slight thing. Then a remake of all the Silver Case games, and then No More Heroes 3. And like No More Heroes 3 really seemed to come and go, probably because it launched exclusively on the Switch to begin with. I wonder what that game plays like on modern consoles after they ported it to it. But yeah, it just feels like it feels like every time you hear about Grasshopper, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see what they do once they get going. And they've never quite exploded in the way that you expected them to, especially with a name like Suda attached to it. So yeah, I really hope that it's, for them, I hope it's something big and it's something impressive and it's something that people latch onto. But yeah, I have no idea what it might be.
Yeah, and I'm like trying to think of like, is there a show on June 15th? I don't think so. I'm like looking at Marino's chart here. The last thing on this chart for Summer Game Fest is Xbox Extended on June 13th and 14th, depending on your time zone. And then there's nothing after that. So it's like, well, I guess, this is after that. This is probably not showing up in another showcase. It's probably going to just be out on its own instead. And okay, fair enough. But it's like, man, it kind of feels like the kind of thing that could just pop into a Summer Game Fest and live there. But maybe they want to have their own spotlight for a little bit. We'll see. We don't have to wait long. We are 10 days out.
It's a sequel to Michigan Report from Hell.
Yes, I'm almost certainly it is, right? That's what actually will get people excited. That's what I need.
I saw that for sale in a CX, which is like a used games retailer in the UK and Ireland, for like 200 quid. It's like,
oh, that's the real money. All right, okay.
Just out of their mind stuff.
Hey, listen, that's why we need a sequel, though, so we can push the market up even further. E3 killed itself. Not competition from Summer Game Fest, says Jeff Keighley, from Chris Scullion at VGC. Summer Game Fest host and producer Jeff Keighley has rubbished suggestions that competition from his rival event was partly responsible for the cancellation of this year's E3. Keighley started Summer Game Fest in 2020 after he split from E3, where he previously held its Coliseum live events. At the time, he cited being uncomfortable with the organizer ESA's plans for E3. In an interview on the latest episode of VGC Podcast, Keighley was asked how he felt about his reputation in some corners of the internet as, quote, the E3 killer. He said, quote, I think E3 sort of killed itself in a way, Keighley replied. I understand why people say SGF killed E3, but I think if anything, we created Summer Game Fest, and I built Summer Game Fest because I saw the wheels falling off the wagon of E3. As someone who loves that time of year for 2 decades, E3 was part of my life since I was 15 years old. From the first E3 in 1995, I went to every show. I loved it, and it defined my summer. He added, it was so exciting to me, and it was heartbreaking to see that start to fall apart. I think they had a relevancy problem, and then they also had a participation problem over the final years. So yeah, I think the question is, if we didn't do Summer Game Fest, what would happen? I think things would have just kind of really splintered apart this summer. I think he's mostly accurate here about his assessment, although I think he was definitely out there when developers and publishers were trying to decide where they're going to put their stuff, I think he was certainly out there being like, don't go with E3, they're a mess, you should come to Summer Game Fest. But I think that's kind of fair at a certain point, and he's not wrong. E3 kind of was a mess.
There is an element to Jeff Keighley sort of going, I can't believe E3 did this.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Just kind of pointing the gat right at E3, and then, a little bit. Absolutely. But all along, he's been doing E3 Judges Week, and that's what Summer Game Fest has really evolved out of. So he's been there the whole time. So the idea that this killed it, it's like, well, no, it couldn't have killed it unless E3 was stumbling on its own, and it clearly was. They could not figure out how to run that show for the life of them over at the ESA. And then they brought in ReedPop, and ReedPop really seemed to figure a lot of stuff out. They just couldn't get over the finish line with a lot of publishers being like, I'm not going to commit if they don't commit. And so it was like this catch-22, and things fell apart for them from there. How are you feeling about Summer Game Fest, though, right now? Like, just looking at it, do you feel like this is a good replacement for E3?
I'm looking forward to it, but also there's always that element of like going to E3 was like always the dream. Listening to old GameSpot live shows, watching that stuff always was the best part of the summer. And I'm like kind of sad that might never happen again, because it does feel like there's definitely a strong feeling of like, can we even bring back E3? Like, has the damage been done? And I was looking at like coming over to LA this year for E3 and Summer Games Fest, and then E3 cancelled. And I was like, well, not doing that because it's just too much of an investment for one thing that might not even have everything. I think right now if it gets a few more years and it grows and it does become something the size of E3, Summer Game Fest could be really great. But right now it's just a bit too small for a lot of international like reporters and stuff to be able to justify the expense of going to it. And also there is a small part of me that looks at it and like, Jeff seems like a very smart guy, but there is always a part of me that's like, there's one person who kind of gets to dictate the tune of summer now. And years past, you would have had Sony, PlayStation, Nintendo, Square Enix, Konami, Capcom, all having their own stage shows that were more or less equally as big, whereas now the biggest one is kind of curated by one person, and that just doesn't feel quite as great. It's hard to feel great about that.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Like, there's no chance. Like, with E3, anything could have happened. Anyone could have shown up there. There's no chance like Konami's going to be at a Summer Game Fest Jeff Keighley thing, right? There's beef there. And it's like, well, that's weird that they're like, we have to keep in mind the beef between people and entities because of, I said entities, and now I'm just thinking about Mike Minotti giggling about ints with titties.
Yeah.
God, I hate that guy. But like, we got to think about Jeff Keighley's personal relationships with other developers, about how like these shows are going to be presented. But beyond that, I mean, E3 was moving in the direction of being a more consumer-focused show, but that Band-Aid just got ripped off, it feels like, and what we are left with is something that really is completely unlike E3. There is just not as much dynamism happening behind the scenes. So by that I mean, like, people just showed up at E3, even if they didn't have a game to show publicly, because there was a chance to get in front of very important people. And they knew that. And so it was worth the cost of travel, the cost of showing up was easily worth the possibility space that existed within E3. And that is not happening here. That is not being replicated at all based on just like putting together my night shows where I'm like, okay, who's going to be there? That even if they don't have a game, they can come hang out on the couch.
Yeah.
And it's like, no one was actually, the answer to that question was basically no one that didn't have a game is going to be there.
I do feel sorry for Gamescom in this situation, because there was kind of this feeling that like Jeff Keighley was starting to really try to bolster Gamescom as his thing and like doing the opening night live, and then he realized he could just do his own thing at the same time as E3, and now his opening night live at Gamescom, like, it super feels like sloppy seconds. It definitely feels like, here's the things we didn't have time for, or here's an extended look at something. So I think they kind of got the short end of the stick in this, like, not as short as fucking E3 and the ESA, but they definitely probably feel a bit jilted about how much work they put into that relationship, and like the German government was funding it and things like that. So yeah, I'm sure there's probably some weird feelings around that too. Yeah,
I mean, he's still doing the opening night live, and I bet he's trying to do his best for what that is at that time. but he's doing his best for Summer Game Fest first, right? So yeah, kind of caused a little bit of a traffic jam there. But hey, I mean, again, we're going out there and we're going to make the best of it. Like, we really, getting out there doing Summer Game Fest this way, kind of trying to treat it similar to the way Giant Bomb has treated E3 for the last several years. It was like a little bit of an experiment, a little like, can this work? And I'll say, we got the night shows planned. I have the segments planned out. We're going to have the first night, like Greg Miller and the crew from Kind of Funny, they're going to be hanging out. They're going to be on a bunch of the segments. Jason Schreier is going to come out and hang out with us. John Drake, some people that have been working on games with him are going to be there. Dave Ushery, a whole bunch of cool people are going to be hanging out. And that's just the first night. Tam and Lucy, Scale Up, the Completions, Jake Baldino will be one of the panels, or one of the segments, I should say. It's going to be a lot of cool friends. It's just the anything is possible sort of attitude I think E3 had. And that a lot of that was like not due to anything the ESA did. It was just like the video game industry decided we're going to go here and anything's going to be possible at this E3. A little bit of that is gone. We're going to try to do our best to replicate it, though.
I mean, there's not going to be like celebrities walking the show floor or something that are like, oh, I want to see Kojima's new game or whatever.
Exactly.
Although that might be for the best, because like if Kanye showed up, that would be pretty bad.
Yes. And it's like we have in the past, like Kenny Omega's been there. It's like, well, are any of the fun wrestlers going to be hanging out? They're like, no, we're not going to Summer Game Fest. And then it was kind of like, why would we be going to Summer Game Fest? I'm like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. You're right. Why
Kenny
would
Omega's
you go?
busy developing that game all on his own.
Exactly. I mean, he's over there playing. He's doing research on N64 wrestling games every day to figure out how to replicate that.
Coding line by line.
It's a beautiful, perfect man out there just doing what he can. All right, let's move on here. It is June 2023, and EA wants to add NFTs to FIFA and Madden. This comes from Luke Plunkett at Kotaku. EA Sports and Nike announced yesterday that at some point in the future, games like FIFA and Madden will feature integration with .swoosh, with Nike describes as its new digital community experience. This is kind of we talked a little bit about this, but they continue to be very serious about it, and they kind of describe the timeline of in the future. There's more to this story, but mostly it comes down to there is a platform that Nike has built for NFTs, and EA is eyeing it, but putting them in FIFA and Madden. In both cases, it's not happening like this year, but they do intend to do it in the future. Do you think that's really going to happen? Or if not, like, why are they still talking about this? I guess is my biggest question here, Lexi.
Yeah, so I think, has there been a single console game that has had NFTs integrated into it? Because if there hasn't, at this point, you have to wonder, are the console manufacturers saying, like, we don't want this shit on our platforms? And maybe FIFA and Madden are, like, the two games that could make that happen, that could push that over the edge. But, like, I don't know who this is for beyond people who play FIFA who have too much money. And there's a lot of those people, in fairness. But like, yeah, the idea that people would still be, because like they've had falsified scarcity in FIFA for years now, and adding NFTs to it doesn't change that, except it might make it more expensive. So I don't know if people will even care about the NFT element, or if they'll just be like, well, I just still want my rare Ultimate Team card.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week when we mentioned the story before they gave like the timeline, and it was we kind of decided, the sports gaming crew is exactly the audience that might be not thinking about NFTs. They're just like, this is an item in the game I play every year, and it has some other sort of intrinsic value, I guess. Well, like they're coming at it from a different angle of like, I view everything through how does it affect my NBA 2K experience or my FIFA experience, and not like, oh, I hate NFTs and now I'm going to play a game and oh my god, there's NFTs here. But even still, like that audience, while engaging deeply with loot boxes, has also been screaming about loot boxes the entire time. Like it's a real love-hate relationship. And I don't know if I don't know why, other than money, obviously, these companies are like ready to poison their games even more with like that love-hate relationship and amping it up even further with NFTs. But maybe they just see the dollar signs and they think it's worth it. I just look at the trajectory of NFTs, and it's just going down. It's going down. Why do you guys think that this is actually still something that can make money? I don't know.
Now, if they put AI into the soccer ball, or what other buzzwords can we fit in?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Hey, well, listen, AI soccer ball. So I watched a YouTube video about a smart baseball, and that seems like a cool thing. I want more of that. All right, let's see here. Last story I'm going to do. Microsoft could withdraw Activision from the UK to counter acquisition block, it's claimed. This is from Andy Robinson of VGC. Microsoft could consider pulling Activision from the UK market as one extreme option to bypass the country's block of its proposed $69 billion acquisition. This is something that we have mentioned before and talked about before on the show, but there is now a report that seems to confirm that this is something that Microsoft is actually considering. This is not like a report from sources. It's like, no, Brad Smith himself, Microsoft vice president, mentioned this to UK Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, that this is something that they are considering. Microsoft confirmed to the publication Bloomberg that Smith will be in London, where he's giving a scheduled talk about the potential of AI and the need for thoughtful regulation of it. He'll also hold private discussions on other issues, including the proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard, as we remain committed to finding creative and constructive ways to address the remaining regulatory concerns, a spokesperson said. Hunt previously criticized the CMA's veto, telling a business conference recently that the competition watchdogs must understand their wider responsibilities. However, Bloomberg claims that the government ministers are also unhappy with some of Smith's public criticism of the CMA, including stating that he believed the EU was a better place to do business than the UK. It's claimed that Smith will meet with Microsoft's legal representatives to discuss the firm's strategy to counter the CMA decision this week, including extreme options such as withdrawing Activision from the UK market or bypass the UK order and pressing ahead with the deal. In theory, if Activision's operations were moved to another European country outside of the CMA's jurisdiction, its games could then continue to be sold via a third-party distributor. So they have, this isn't just like a hypothetical. They already have like a strategy in place of how to execute it. Go to a different place in the EU, go into the EU, actually, leaving the UK to go to the EU, and then set up with a company inside the UK that would then license the games effectively and just distribute those in the UK, and they would have to worry about the regulations themselves, that third party. It does seem extreme, but it also seems rather likely today. What do you think?
Yeah, I just wonder who you would make that deal with. Who's big enough that could front up the money to get all those physical copies out?
Embracer Group, right? Like that seems like THQ Nordic or one of their labels comes in and handles the publishing and distribution. I could totally see that happening. Like that makes some sense. Now, it's weird. It's weird and wild and wacky, the idea of pulling out of an entire country to get a deal like this to go through. But boy, Microsoft seems that serious about it, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest, I think publishing will almost be like the simplest part of this. The thing that will become really difficult for Microsoft and Activision then will be doing any other business in the UK. Like any conversation you have, any meeting you take, that will become a much more involved process of like, oh, who are you here representing? Are you representing Microsoft or are you representing Blizzard? And, if Microsoft technically isn't an entity, or if Blizzard isn't an entity in the UK, who is doing those meetings in the UK? That seems like a wild situation to be in, but also Microsoft seems so steadfast on getting this through, and the UK or the CMA is so certain that they have rejected the deal and that there's not going to be any other outcome. I think this is becoming a more and more likely possibility.
Yeah, and it goes back to this is a strategy that Microsoft's had for a while, and this is the most extreme version of it, but we drink your milkshake. We will just surround you with everyone else getting the deal and everyone else getting the benefits of the deal, for the games being in Game Pass and everyone being excited and of like, oh, this is now I can just get Call of Duty as part of Game Pass Ultimate every year. That's awesome. Well, not in the UK, but everyone around the UK is getting it, and it's going to weaken the resolve of the CMA over time, I think, because people are gonna be like, yeah, we get it. $69 billion acquisition. That's a big number. We get why you stood in the way. It's already done though. It's already happened everywhere else. We're years removed from this. Can we please just get Call of Duty into that? And I bet the CMA relinquishes or relents 3 or 4 years from now.
And honestly, as an Irish person, I would get great schadenfreude from it not being on Game Pass in the UK. That would just be very funny. That would be hilarious.
That's finally justice has been served. Yeah.
This is for the famine, motherfuckers.
How about
we
them
get
potatoes?
To play Call of Duty.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The poll from sometime in the past, Friday, I believe. Which VR headset are you more excited about? PSVR 2 or MetaQuest 3? 57% are more excited about PSVR 2, whereas 43% are more excited about MetaQuest 3. I think that's fair. I'm personally more excited for the MetaQuest 3 though.
Yeah, is that good for PSVR 2 or is that bad for MetaQuest 3?
I think it's a little bit of both. And a little bit of both. Yeah, I don't know how to read it either. You're right. It's like right there where I'm like, oh, okay. I guess maybe if PSVR 2 was like the clear front runner, maybe it should be a bigger gap. But I thought MetaQuest 3 would also put up a little bit more of a fight. I don't know. I think it's kind of split. But yeah, we'll see. I'll see how this changes. MetaQuest 3 isn't out. PSVR 2 is out, and yet people are still more excited about the PSVR 2. I think that bodes pretty well for the PSVR 2. And we'll see how that system continues to sell throughout this year. All right, we have a new poll question that I will get up right now. And I think it's actually already up here. We'll check on it. But in the meantime, Lexi, what do you have going on? What do you want to tell people you got, where they could find you on the internet and all that good stuff?
So you can currently find me in upcoming issues of Play magazine. I will also be in Lost in Cult's next volume of books things. If you are looking for what I actually do daily, I run a website called Start Menu. We are a website for young and upcoming journalists and basically anyone trying to get into the games industry. And we will work with young, or not even young, but any writers that are looking to try to break into the industry, help them find opportunities, get experience working with an editor, getting their stuff up on a professional looking website. And we have loads of people in our Discord who are more than happy to like help you with your CV or help you give advice with how to pitch people. And so, yeah, if you are just looking for a safe and friendly place to actually break into the industry, we're a good place to start. You can find us at the Start Menu on Twitter. You can email us at hello@startmenu.co.uk, or you can find me on Twitter at basically Lexi with eyes in both of those words.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that work that you all are doing with that. That's such a cool thing. All right, we have the poll for actually Wednesday. Excuse me. We will have the Bombcast tomorrow. On Wednesday, we'll be back with Game This Morning, so we'll talk about how high are your expectations for the Xbox Starfield Showcase. And I say that we actually won't be back, so maybe I will talk about this on the Bombcast because I'm going to be traveling on Wednesday. I can't that really just snuck up on me, Lexi. Where oh my god, this week I'm leaving. I am not ready at all. I'm not even thinking about it, and it's like okay, I did my laundry. I just didn't get packed. So, I was
literally about to say, like, are you sure you have a show on Wednesday?
No, I'm not, because I don't. I am absolutely not doing one. I will be traveling, and hopefully I'll be having some fun that day, because it's like we got a lot of work to do after that. So we're gonna have a little bit of fun on Wednesday, and then get into the work that day and beyond. But on the show on the Bombcast tomorrow, we'll talk about this because we'll also talk about our expectations for the showcase and all that stuff. But you can vote 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@giantbomb/community is where you could find that. It's on the community tab. 5 is the highest there. So if you're super excited, go ahead and vote 5. I'm going to put myself right now. I'm going to vote right now. I'm at a 4 because I just don't know. I'm at a 4.
I'm at a 3. I'm not feeling great.
Yeah, a lot of people are at 3 right now. So, okay, well, we'll get the rest of those. We'll give people a little bit more time to vote. That's 115 votes. We'll see if that shakes out any different by tomorrow. All right. Yeah, that's on Giant Bomb on the Bombcast tomorrow. Look out for that. What else do we have this week? It's going to be a very busy week, but on Thursday, we will be reacting to Summer Game Fest. Look out for that. On Friday, by Friday night, we will be having our nightly shows that will be happening everywhere where you watch us live, Twitch and YouTube. Look out for that. It's going to be starting at 6 p.m. Pacific time. We will be going into the night. We're going to be going to probably about midnight when we're done with that last segment. We'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be back on Saturday doing the same thing. On Sunday, we will be talking over the Xbox Showcase and the Starfield Direct, and then we'll be doing our Sunday night show and wrapping things up probably around 11 p.m. that night. But we'll see. There. Yeah, be there. It's going to be a ton of fun. It really is. We'll talk about it more in the Bombcast.
I'm looking forward to it so much. Yeah, as a Giant Bomb fan, after almost 4 years now of no E3 at night stuff, I'm super looking forward to it. So best of luck. The final segment on Friday night, the first night, is Dan Reichert, Mike Minotti, Snowbike Mike, and Mary Kish. So I think we're going to have some fun. And I'm going to be there on the couch, talking to everybody. And then these idiots are probably going to be drinking all night and then come over there and
cause me real hell. So
you know you're in trouble when like you're the respectable one.
exactly, it's going to be a real issue, a real issue. Also, yeah, I'll say this here since again this is the last Game S mornings before we get to all this stuff. Phil Spencer plan to be there Sunday night, Sunday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So Phil Spencer, Matt Booty will be joining me, Tam, and Lucy on the couch. We're going to try to have a cool conversation. It will be after the showcase, so look out for that. It's going to be a good time.
Ask him about Voodoo Vince.
I will ask him about Voodoo Vince. Absolutely. All right. Lexi, thank you so much for talking with me today about video games. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure.
And everybody, thank you for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. We'll have more Giant Bomb for you for the rest of this week. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye. All right, we did it.
Hey.
Now I got to go pack a suitcase. Actually, I got to go to a meeting.